Hello, how are you guys doing tonight? My name is Brant Hunt, and my YouTube channel is Discerning What is True. And today is the second day of January 2023, and I'm going to be reading again from the Tavistock Institute, wanting to make you aware of how they use propaganda and how they have seduced us for a long time. So, Tavistock is a group. It's in England. All of its particular things that have started actually during the First World War. This was also to make Germany the enemy of Britain. Britain itself did not want competition, that is, economic competition with Germany. Germany was becoming an industrial power, and that was a threat to them. And so, what they decided to do was to badmouth the Germans. And we're not going to go any more further than that, but just want to explain to you that. And again, this work is done by Dr. John Coleman. Dr. John Coleman has written other works. His other works he has done is this particular book here, Conspiracy Hierarchy, the Committee of 300. That somehow is also called the Club of Rome. And also another name called Spartans. So this is what they're talking about, simply is to gradually control man by fooling him and using all kinds of psychological tricks to keep people in fear. So here we go with chapter 28. How Tavistock makes well people sick. Tavistock's story begins with his founder as Brigadier General John Rawlings Rees in 1921. So this is over 100 years ago. It was Rees who evolved Tavistock methods of mass brainwashing. Tavistock was founded as a research center for British Special Intelligence Services, which was called SIS. It was Rees who launched the method of controlling political campaigns as well as mind control techniques, which continue to this very day. And it was Rees and Tavistock who taught the USSR, North Vietnam, China, and Vietnam how to apply his techniques. So this may explain what happened to the American soldiers during the Korean War when they were taken prisoner by China. All they ever wanted to know about how to brainwashes individuals or a mass of people. Rees was a close confidant of the late Margaret Mead. Many people feel that Margaret Mead is some type of hero. She's not. She introduced all kinds of ideas that are actually in the schoolroom these days, and has infiltrated what we call natural instincts and has made people psychologically sick. And her husband, Gregory Basin, both of whom played major roles in shaping U.S. institutions that make government policy. He was also a friend of Kurt Lewin, who was expelled from Germany after being accused of being an active Zionist. Lewin fled Germany when he became apparent that the NSDAP would control Germany. Lewin rose to become Tavistock's director in 1932. He played a major role in preparing the American people for entry into World War II. Lewin was responsible for organizing the greatest propaganda machine known to mankind, which he directed against the whole German nation. Lewin's machine was responsible for whipping the American public opinion to favoring the war by engendering a climate of hatred against Germany. What was it that made the Rees method so successfully? Basically, it was this. The same psychotherapy techniques used to cure a mental sick individual could be applied in the opposite direction. He could also use to make healthy people become mentally ill. Rees began his long series of experiments in the 1930s using British Army recruits as test cases. From there, Rees progressed to perfecting mass brainwashing techniques, which he was later to apply to countries slated for change. One such country was the United States, which remains the focus of attention at Tavistock. Rees began applying his behavior modification techniques against the American people in 1946. Few, if any, realized the extreme threat to America which Reese posed. The British Army Psychological Warfare Bureau was set up at Tavistock through secret agreements with Churchill. Don't ever put Churchill as a hero, folks. He is not a hero at all. He was a very sick man. And yet, people put this guy up on a pedestal. Before Churchill became prime minister, agreements gave the British Special Operations Executives, commonly known as SOE, full control over the policies of the U.S. Armed Forces. You see what's going on here, folks? Acting through civilian channels, and which invariably became official U.S. government policy. I remember reading a particular work that was on Kindle, and I got it from Amazon. It was someone, I'm trying to think his name, and it kind of escapes me right now, but he did an article on Winston Churchill. Churchill was a madman. Churchill was involved in the South Africa War with the Boers, the Boers. He was inspirational in trying to get them out of there because basically they discovered what I call huge amounts of gold, all kinds of metals, diamonds, all these type of things, and Britain wanted those things. And the Boers, which are what I call the Afrikaners, are Dutchmen, Dutchland. They're probably from Holland, I meant to say. And so they have what they call a language they call the Afrikaner. It's a break between Dutch and also the African language that they were there. Probably the Indian, not the Indians, but the blacks who lived there, the tribes were there. And the way they eventually won, actually the Boers were beating them pretty handily until the British decided to lock up their children and their wives into a concentration camp. You see. So it wasn't Russia, the first country, or Soviet Union to do that. It wasn't Germany, the first ones to do that. It's always the one who points the finger, folks. First one that points the finger, they're the ones that are doing it. Okay? Anybody that points the finger that some country over here is doing something wrong is actually the ones that are doing it. It's always the opposite. That's what psychological warfare is. And that's how the Boers lost the war. And Winston Churchill was all in favor of this. And read some of the things that Churchill does and shares with Stalin as they have their conferences, such and such. And you'll find that simply is Churchill was very much inclined with the communists, you see. And we know also that the United States, that is the bankers and the industrialists, gave tons and tons, not only of money to destroy Russia's government, but also gave them the technology to build certain things like tanks and airplanes that they were actually behind in. That was given to them, you see. Anyway, I digress. That agreement is still firmly in place and is unacceptable to patriotic Americans today as it was when established. It was the discovery of this agreement that led General Eisenhower to issue his historical warning about powers accumulated in the hands of the military-industrial complex. Yeah, apparently General Eisenhower was a stooge in many ways. He was a stooge not only as working as a supreme commander in World War II, but he was also, as though he was a war hero, he was elevated to become the president of the United States after Truman. And what took place with this simply is that he eventually figured out that he'd been a stooge for quite a while. And he turned, when he was no longer useful to them, he began to turn against them, especially in his last few years of his life. So that we fully understand the influence of Tavistock in the daily political, social, and religious and economic life of the U.S., allow me to explain that it was Kurt Lewin, the second in command, who was responsible for founding the following American institutions, many of whom were responsible for making profound changes to U.S. foreign and local policies. And I've known I've shared this before, that is with Dr. John Coleman, but he continues to reiterate these groups because they're pivotal in how they make policy that is here in this country. We're actually at war, folks, but we don't know we're at war. That is, the normal citizen has no idea what's going on, period. And a citizen that actually watches this news is being brainwashed also. They're not telling you the truth. The Harvard Psychological Clinic is one of them. The MIT, that is Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The Committee on National Morale, RAND, R-A-N-D Corporation. National Defense Resource Councils. The National Institute for Mental Health. The National Training Laboratory. The Stanford Research Center. The Wharton School of Economics, which is at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. The New York Police Department. The FBI. And also the CIA. And also not only the RAND Corporation, but also the RAND Institute. So these all agencies are working. This is in 46, folks. So this has been going on for approximately over 70 years in this country. Lewin felt the task of selecting key personnel for these and other highly prestigious research institutes, including Esalen, E-S-A-L-E-N, the RAND Corporation, the U.S. Air Force, the Navy, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the State Department. In later years, Tavistock conditioned those chosen to operate the ELF weather modification facilities located in Wisconsin and in Michigan as a defense against those operating from the Kola Peninsula, anyway, it's on the peninsula, I should say, in Russia. So you see, Tavistock is actually involved in weather modification too, folks. It's what they call extra low frequency weather modification. It was through institutions like Stanford and RAND that the treasonous and famous MK Ultra plan got its start. MK Ultra was a 20-year experiment utilizing LSD and other mind-altering drugs carried forward under the direction of Aldous Huxley. That's right, Mr. Huxley, a Fabian himself, and the guru of the ban the bomb movement, Bertrand Russell, another Fabian, the senior statesmen of the 300, for and on behalf of the CIA. In the Second Gulf War, Tavistock trained operatives showed U.S. General Miller how to run systematic torture to extract information from Muslims captives held at Abu Ghraib prison. You remember those pictures of what they were doing to these people? Do you remember the pictures of these people? Very sick, folks. In Iraq and Guantanamo Bay in Cuba that shocked and disgusted the world when they were exposed. How can you be, quote unquote, a good country when you're doing this to your captives, folks? Tell me. That's not what you do, period. Through these and other similar mind control, mood altering drugs, Lewin, Huxley, and Russell were able to do indescribable damage to the youth of America, damage from which we as a nation will probably never fully recover. Their horrible drug experiments were carried out from Stanford Research and McGill University and Bethesda Naval Hospital at U.S. Army locations scattered all along across the country. It's worth repeating that the movement which spouted off among our youth in the 50s and 60s, known as the New Age or the Age of Aquarius, was a Tavistock program. It's a Tavistock program, folks. The New Age and the Age of Aquarius is a Tavistock program. There was nothing spontaneous about it. Nudity was introduced in conformity with the course taken to demean women. By 2005, the new fad is called hip hop, a type of dance game played mainly by children in the poorest suburbs of American cities. It was picked up by Tavistock and turned into a full-blown industry with their specialists writing the music and lyrics until it is one of the best profit makers for the recording industry. Yeah, I made a post about this years ago and how the music changed back in the 90s. And it was very derogatory towards women. That's what it's about, folks. It's all about sex. There's nothing about the virtues of a woman. She's now nothing but a whore, you see. Reese's method was closely followed by Aldous Huxley, portraying Russell, Arnold Toynbee, and Aleister Crowley, another interesting guy. Russell was particularly adept at working at Tavistock methods in forming his CND, that is, Ban the Bomb campaign, which opposed U.S. nuclear experiments. Tavistock think tanks receive massive U.S. government funding. Such institutions conduct research experiments with mass population conditioning. The CND movement was a front from behind which Huxley dispensed drugs for the youth of Britain. In these experiments, the American people have been more of a large target than any other nation group in the world. As I've disclosed in 1969 and 2004, since 46, the U.S. government has poured billions of dollars into these projects, which may be classed as undercover operations. That is, the experimentation programs go under other names and titles so that the unsuspecting American people raise no protest at such lavish government spending. In such Tavistock experiments, every aspect of America's way of life, its customs, its traditions, its history, are examined to see if they can be subject to change. Every aspect of our psychological and physiological life is constantly under scrutiny at Tavistock U.S. institutions. If you remember the movie, it was done back in the early 60s called The Manchurian Candidate. And there are some that are suspected that actually one of our presidents was actually a Manchurian agent. It was done that way also by either, as they did this in this movie back in 1960, to do with simply as a phone call or something. The certain said something and it would change them. Suddenly they went into another mode in their brain. The change agents worked tirelessly to change our way of life and made it look as some changes are merely changing times to which we must adapt. These forced changes are to be found in politics, religion, music, the way the news is manufactured and reported, the style of delivery of the news readers, with the proponents of American women readers who had every last trace of femininity driven out of them, the style and delivery of speeches made by Mr. Bush, that is, short sentences accompanied by facial contortions and body movement taught by change artists. His manner of walking, that is a U.S. Marine style, the rise of the so-called Christian fundamentalists in politics, the overwhelming support for isms, the list is endless. This is all divide and conquer here, folks. That's what this is all about also. But it's not from a military objective. It's like a Trojan horse, you see. We allow these people to come in. And what they've done is they've destroyed our culture, our society. And people say, well, the word, people just are being pulled by this new age crap. But it's another savior program, folks. It's just another religion, just like the whole thing that Christianity is about. It's just another deal like that. They just upgrade the game here. The outcome, the net result of these experiment programs determine how, where we shall live in the present and the future, how we will react to stressful situations in our national and personal lives, and how our thinking on national level regarding education, religion, morals, economics, politics can be channeled in the right direction. We, the people, have been and are being endlessly studied at the Tavistock Institute. Well, of course they are. Even Facebook does this, folks. We're dissected, profiled, thought read, and the data enter in computer data banks for the purpose of shaping and planning how we will react to planned future shocks and stressful situations. All this is done without our consent and in gross violation of our constitutional right to privacy. These profiling results and pronunciations are entered into databases in computers at the National NSA, the FBI, the Department of Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, the National Security Agency, to name but a few places where there's such a data set. He must have repeated himself here. Sorry about that. The lines between internal and external spying are being blurred as the American people are conditioned for the coming one world government wherein surveillance of individuals will reach unprecedented levels. Well, we go into stores now that have, you walk in a store, there's a camera. They're actually on a tube. You see yourself. You're being looked at all the time. You go to the stops light. There's a camera there looking at you. You see all this, and it's not there for your safety, folks. That's bullshit. It was this kind of information which allowed the FBI to get away with burning David Koresh and his Branch Davidians while the nation watched it happen on national TV without hardly a whimper of protest. Yeah, they made this guy out to be a bad guy. People, the American people are so gullible. They're completely gullible. They don't even think. They don't even see anything's wrong. They just keep going along. An astonishing lack of protest from Congress. In one move, the states' rights of Texas were destroyed. Waco was meant as a test case to see how the population would react to witnessing a 10th Amendment being destroyed before their very eyes. In this profile, the people of Texas as the United States acted precisely in the manner the Tavistock profile. They acted like sheep peacefully grazing on grass as a Judas goat that would lead them to the slaughterhouse, circle the flock. What has happened, that is happening, that is, on an ongoing basis, was foretold by Carter's national security advisor. That's right, Brzezinski, in his New Age book, The Technocratic Era, published in 1970. What he predicted in happening before our eyes, but the deadly sinister nature of those unfolding events is lost upon the public. The reality of what Brzezinski foretold in 1970 has come to pass. I suggest that you read the book, if it is attainable, and then, as I have done, compare events that have transpired since 1970 with what is stated in his technotropic era. The accuracy of Brzezinski's forecasting is not only amazing, but also rather frightening. If you are still skeptical, then read 1984 by George Orwell. Orwell was a former MI6 British intelligence operative. Okay, so if you think that Orwell is actually doing this as though he's got a good heart, I think you're sadly mistaken. Okay, because he was a British intelligence operative. He was part of the Fabians, you see. Orwell had to write his startling revelation as fiction to avoid being prosecuted under the British Official Secret Act. Orwell's newspeak is now everywhere to be found, and just as he predicted, arouses no opposition because people are unaware. They don't have any idea what's going on. Readers thought Orwell was describing Russia, but he was foretelling the coming of a regime far worse than the Bolshevik regime, the New World Order government of Great Britain. One has only to look over the legislation passed by the Blair regime to see that liberties have been crushed, political dissent has been crushed, the Magna Carta put to flames, and in its place a set of draconian laws that make for ominous reading. As goes England today, so goes the United States tomorrow, according to an old saying. Like it or not, Brzezinski predicted that we, the people, would have nothing left of our right to privacy. Every little detail of our lives would be known by the government and subject to instant recall from data banks. By the year 2000, he said private citizens would be in the grip of government control as never before experienced by any other nation. Today is 2005, that is. We are under constant surveillance, such as could not be imagined a few years ago. The Fourth Amendment has been trampled. Our best protection from a gargantuan state, the 10th Amendment, no longer in existence, and has all been made possible through the work of Reese and the social scientists, that is, the social scientists who control Tavistock Institute. In 1969, by order of the Committee of 300, Tavistock established the Club of Rome, at first reported in my monographs of 1969. The Club of Rome then established the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that is, NATO, as a political alliance. By 1999, we were discovering the truth about NATO. It is a political entity with military support by its member nations. Tavistock provided key personnel for NATO from its inception and still does. So these guys that are leaders in this group are being themselves brainwashed. They're being taught certain things. They're not thinking on their own. That's why we're this completely chaos. What we find ourselves with Ukraine right now makes no sense at all. They write all the key policies for NATO. In other words, Tavistock controls NATO. Proof this can be seen in the way in which NATO was able to bomb Serbia for 72 days and nights and get away with it, although it violated the Fourth Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, the Nuremberg Protocols, and the United Nations Charter. There was no outcry from the American people or the British people against such barbarous action. Well, most of us didn't even know what was going on. I didn't. I knew that we were doing something up there, but I didn't realize we'd been bombing them for 72 days and nights. Because they don't tell you. Of course, this has all been predetermined from Tavistock data banks. They knew exactly how the public would react or not react to the bombings. Had an unfavorable determination been made beforehand as to how the public would react, there would have been no bombing raids over Serbia. And we're gradually working our way into Ukraine. We have troops there now since December. Maybe earlier than that, who knows? What the hell are we there for? We're sure ain't there for freedom. We're not. We're stirring the pot. Precisely the same Tavistock studies were used to certain public reactions to raining down cruise missiles and bombs on the open city of Baghdad in 2002. That is, Mr. Rumsfeld called it a shock and awe tactic. Barbarous behavior of the magnitude was indulged in because the president and his men already knew beforehand that there would be no outcry from the American public. See, you're the ones that are supposed to be the authorities here, folks, not them. By you giving your consensus and obedience or not saying anything, or your consent, you allow this. That's what you do. You have more power than you realize, but you fail to do that. You somehow have been taught simply as you don't mean anything. Well, the hell with that shit, because what we're doing right now is destroying the whole planet. And it has nothing to do with ecological stuff. It has to do with what's going on in Ukraine, other countries that we bomb, like Libya. Did Libya attack anybody, folks? Can you tell me? Did Libya attack any other country? No. Did Iraq attack any country? Well, yes, because they were told to attack Kuwait. They were also told to steal their oil. Both the Club of Rome and NATO have considerably influenced in foreign policy decisions taken by the U.S. government, and they continue to do so. Today, as we saw in the case of the unprovoked attack on Serbia and Iraq, acceded to by the Clinton and Bush administration respectively. History provides other examples of national control of the U.S. by Tavistock. When the Second World War broke out, the United States was subject to a pre-planned brainwashing campaign of the most massive proportions, prepared and executed by the Tavistock Institute. This would pave the way for smooth entry of the U.S. into a war that was none of our business and muzzled those opposed to it. Do you recall? You remember that we put the Japanese people here in America, we put them in concentration camps? We're no better than the Soviet Union. Oh, yeah, and most of those camps were in California, out west, out in the middle of somewhere else where no one would even see them. But it's done on purpose. And that was under Franklin Roosevelt's deal, folks. Yeah, he's a great president, isn't he? They're part of the enemy here. The other thing is kind of interesting. Why didn't they lock up the German people here in America? Well, that's the problem. Is simply there's a lot more of them than there were Japanese. Get it? All of Roosevelt's grand speeches were composed by technicians skilled in mind control at Tavistock, many of them emanating from the Fabian Society. You better believe they're from the Fabian Society. Americans were told that the war was started by Germany, that the danger of Germany to world peace was far greater than the threat of Bolsheviks would ever be. Yeah, it's interesting, another concept here. We did declare war on Japan. The next day, we declared war on Germany. But Germany did not attack the United States, folks. Do you understand here what's going on? Well, they're part of the Axis power. But they did not attack us at all. Germany never attacked the United States, folks. And only Japan was baited into it with what we call the old warships, the battleships in Pearl Harbor that was moved from San Diego to Hawaii, so it would be easier for the Japanese to do that. A substantial number of social scientists working at Tavistock U.S. institutions were selected to lead the charge in persuading the American people that America's entry into war was the proper course for it to take. However, they did not succeed until Japan was forced to fire the first shot at Pearl Harbor, you see. And so this is what's happened here. This is how they do this. They're actually controlling everything and how things happen. Nothing happens by accident, folks. That is a quote from Franklin Roosevelt. He stated it in office. Nothing happens by accident. And that's true because they planned it all. They planned it all because they have all the money. They have all the resources. You see, the only thing is simply they need foot soldiers. They need the quote unquote foot soldiers to do these things and see the enemy as really a bad deal and brainwash them to see them as the enemy. You see. Well, that concludes chapter 28. So I hope that you enjoy this or you don't enjoy it. I'm expressing my opinion here and how I feel that these things need to be shared with people. And I think it's key that basically people need to know the truth. And this book, done by this gentleman long ago, Dr. John Coleman, tells you really actually what has happened. And it's your choice, folks. It is your choice. So I appreciate you being here. You take care and you have a good night. Thank you.